Coach, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm excited to talk with you today. I know you and I have had lots of really cool conversations after practices in the parking lot over the phone. And so I'm just really excited to talk about all things mental performance and softball. Here in Nebraska, we're gearing up for high school season in the fall. And yeah, give us a snapshot of who you are, how long you've been coaching, and where you're coaching at and what's next.
All right. Well, I'm at Papio South High School. I'm going into my fifth season there. 14th year as the head coach in the Metro. 23rd year in fast pitch. Um, this season it's going to be an interesting growth season for us. We graduated 8 seniors last year, so we got a lot of things to replace this coming up season. But the kids have done a great job this summer. They show up and they work hard, and we've been able to, put a lot of pieces in place to be ready to go this fall. So
It's going to be great. And for those of you guys that are listening, Nebraska, I think we calculated is an 8-week season. If you take out preseason and postseason, it is hard and heavy.
it is very intense. We'll play anywhere between 32 to 36 games in those 8 weeks, and we get that 10-day window of practice at the very beginning, and which includes a inter squad and a jamboree game now. And so it's not even all just practice games or practices, but yeah, once we hit the ground running, there's not a lot of wiggle room for growth after that. So
Yeah. Well, let's jump right in. You mentioned the jamboree game, and I know I gave you crap for that as we have all these games that we start more than any other sport. Is volleyball has a little bit of breathing room, and then we jump right into it. Talk about one of the first conversations that you and I had together where, we were discussing mental performance. You wanted me to come in and do some sessions with your team. Talk about that internal dialogue and that dialogue with me of, oh man, do we sacrifice physical practice time? You and I had decided to start in the classroom. Can you talk about that internal struggle as a coach of, man, we're so used to physical, physical, physical. Every minute of every practice plan is planned. Can you talk about that?
yeah, it got to a point where we were just wanting to allow our students to focus on the mental side and the confidence piece of it. And we wanted to give them an opportunity or even an edge, really, in their performance. And so we thought that, hey, this was going to be a good place to start and get into the classroom. And I've always kind of done classroom stuff for about 10 years or so, as far as like in the summer and the off season, and where we have conversations of leadership and what the team's going to look like. But to do it like building up to the season and in season, you're right. It was kind of like okay, we're wasting time, not being on the
Air
field, and,
quotes. Yeah.
getting our reps in and all that kind of stuff. And, but it really gave the players a great opportunity, and great dialogue was what we found as the season went on. In that practice that you came out and ran for them, and we started behind the shed and had the conversations, and came out and we did the failure drill. And then we came back and had the conversation, like essentially one drill for like an hour, was one deal we are doing. But, again, it gave them a real world experience to see that failure piece, and then to be able to apply it right away. Which for our game, as anaerobic as it is and as long as it is, it's still explosion at times, and they need to be ready to go. And their last rep or hit or ball hit to them could have been an error, and they've got to learn to let it go, because they might get the next one, or they might not get it for 20 minutes, and then they're going to sit there and dwell on it. And again, they've got to learn to release it. And so working with you has been awesome, in the dialogue that we're able to have with our players at practice or in games or whatever, and we start moving things forward. I know at some point, we'll bring up the fatty baddies,
Yep.
and that was the girls were able to name their positive personality that got them moving and being in that zone. And for years you've heard people kind of talk about that, like being in the zone and what's that mean. I think working with you and what we've been able to do with these kids is being able to get in that zone is great, but they recognize when they're not in that zone. They recognize when they're in a negative mindset, and then it helps them work through it a lot quicker. And we've seen it. We've seen it on the field, and we've seen it through a season, and kids get their growth piece of it. And and they're not necessarily the same at the beginning of the season that they are at the end of the season because they've worked for so long. So it's been a good experience.
Yeah. I love that common language. And when you're talking about that, the conversations that you and I have had of not just as, I'm not just teaching the girls as a coaching staff, you guys are kind of morphing. How are you coaching? Can you kind of talk about, we'll just dive into that conversation of, you know, seeing you at the state tournament this past year. And I will never forget this. You said, "Hey, did you know that our state shirts were orange?" And that was such a cool moment for me because we had talked about personality colors in the conversations of, if your entire team is quote unquote an orange personality, but you yourself are a gold coach, talk about those conversations that you and I have had about how has that changed how you and your staff coach your girls?
So you'll hear a coach say all the time, every team is different. Year to year, they're always different. And I think one of the things for us was when we did the personality test and we saw where we were at and everything, and I'm very structured. You're right. I'm a gold. And we come to practice, we do our work, we get done, and we move on.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of oranges the last couple of years, and they need music at practice and they want to mess around a little bit, and they need to be not necessarily less structure, but it does have to be a shade more fun, like for them to like stay engaged the entire time. Yeah, it definitely changed the way practice plans happened over the last 2 years. And this last season specifically, we were senior led. Like I said, we had 8 seniors. The majority of them are oranges. And so we leaned into the wave and we just went with it. And so our practice plans looked that way. They were a little bit looser, but on task. And when we qualified for state again, that's where the orange shirts came from. It was just, you know what? Hey, we adopted it, we accepted it, and we're gonna flaunt it now. And we go to the state tournament all wearing orange. But yeah, it is really good. It's also given me an understanding as a coach and the fact that, hey, this is who I am, this is what I want to see, these are my results. However, they're not hearing the same thing as I'm talking to them because of the way they process it, because of the way they look at stuff. And so it's given us an opportunity to identify our players and say, hey, here's my structured kid. All right, this is what we're going to do over here. This is kind of my, free and loose kid. And this is how I'm going to have to talk to her and address her and get through stuff. As a pitching coach by trade, I know all of my pitchers are a little bit different. And it's a matter of going out to the circle and knowing, do I need to tell a joke to one kid and getting her to loosen up? Do we need to get more serious with another player and be like, hey, this is our performance and our expectation and just how they're going to respond? This gave us that on a bigger scale, being able to do that with all of the players opposed to just like very specific individuals. So, yeah, it's been interesting. It's been good to be able to make those adjustments. I think practice was fun last year. I think one of the things the girls really enjoyed, so our team last year was they knew their jobs. They were senior led. They were veterans. And so it wasn't about showing up to practice and being like, all right, here's the game plan. This is what we're going to do. And we're going to get through it. They knew what they were going to do. They knew their jobs. So I started every practice with a dad joke. Some are good, some are bad. And they let me know. They were very good about critiquing all of my jokes. It allowed us to start practice that way with a bunch of oranges that needed to laugh to get moving forward and to have fun through practice. So, yeah, it's just those little nuances is what's going to allow us to be successful. So,
And if you were a time traveler and you could go back to Tom 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, you probably would have looked at yourself like you were crazy. You would have never guessed that that's how you would have started practice.
I tell you, yeah. So I tell people all the time, 14 years in, I said, I would not have coached this way 14 years ago. And, players have changed and times have changed or whatever. But, yeah, I mean, every older coach can go back and say that. They're like, oh man, I was inexperienced, or man, probably shouldn't have been doing that, 15 years ago or whatever. But, those guys, back then, again, it was still just about that structure, and that's who I was, my way or the highway. It is what it is. And, now I think that just being able to communicate and have that good communication with the players is huge. I think one of the things that we focus on, and maybe we'll talk about it later, but it's just a confidence piece for some of our athletes. I have some really good athletes, and they don't see that. And so us being able to have those conversations of, no, this is what you do well, and them recognizing that what they do well. Again, it's that communication piece that we're able to build on. So
Yeah. Well, and it's the culture that you've built that a lot of the programs that I've either coached myself or been a part of, when I step into the classroom or step onto the field with your girls as their mental performance coach, coming into the fold, being a part of your staff to complement. And I tell them, you guys really have a great coaching staff that cares about you. I think that culture has become evident. Whereas in the first couple years, they kind of looked at me like, yeah, yeah, sure. But I think they're starting to see that, and having that in your repertoire as a coach, I think speaks volumes because, you know, watching you from afar and watching you coach, the end of season is truly bittersweet. And watching you guys at the state tournament, I see and hear those conversations from the girls, and you want them to have those fond memories. And I don't think that that's the case for every program,
sure.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So let's jump in. I had a note. I want to talk about the past couple of years and kind of the cool story that you guys have built, which, um, I suppose I should go back and clarify. Your school colors are blue, and so
Yep.
to have orange state shirts is kind of unique. But talk a little bit about, go back to 2021. You had asked me to start working with your team and your program and having those skills and those realizations. Describe what made those a difference maker in your season. You and I have kind of gone through some of the stats. You remember the stats better than I do, but talk about 2021 postseason.
So 21 postseason. So that year in itself was really unique. So we had started working together in the summer and throughout the season and everything, and things were kind of moving along. Season was going fine, and that was the year we lost our starting pitcher to that car accident where she had that leg injury, and so we were right in the middle of the season. And as I kind of told everybody at the time, it was kind of like building an airplane while we were flying it. We didn't have a lot of time to, shut down and rebuild. And even after the accident where we had, 7 players, one way or another, were involved with that whole thing, like we had to play the next day. And so we had to have all of these conversations, and a lot of the stuff that we had worked with you and talking about just their identity and building that self too, and jumping onto the fatty baddies and everything, what we were looking for and continue to build for, helped us maintain a goal. And so going into districts that year, I think we were seated overall somewhere 14th or 16th in the state. We were 14 and 16 overall. And we had, I don't want to say limped, but we had worked for every win we had gotten up to that point. We had put a lot of time and effort into. To be able to qualify for state around here, though, we got automatic bids. And so as I told them going into it, I said, hey, the only way we're making it to Hastings this year, which would have been our second year in a row, is we got to win districts. And we ended up in the number 1 overall district of Gretna. It was the number 1 team in the state, and they were sitting at 27-3 at the time. I said, all right, here's our role. This is who we got to go through to get there. And what happened at districts really propelled into our 2022 season as well. It gave me a real tangible experience that I was able to give to the next year's team. We'll talk about that in a second. But going into it, I told them, I said, hey, we have to win to go. We have absolutely nothing to lose. We're number 14th in the state, guys. This isn't, nobody's expecting us to win this. Okay. We're getting ready to play the number 1 team in the state. And we took a very aggressive, fun, what we termed later is our #flex mentality. And we just played with it. We stayed completely positive. No mistake mattered. No strikeout mattered. No home run given up mattered. And they played really free and loose. And it was really awesome to watch because, as a coach, you get to sit back and just like your athletes just played. And they went out there and they made big plays and they celebrated each other throughout the entire thing. Our dugout was completely dialed in. Mariah, the pitcher who ended up with the leg injury, she kind of became, so we have these inning boards in the dugout, and it keeps scouting reports, and it keeps what we've done through the inning and all this kind of stuff. Well, she's also an artist on top of that. And so she started drawing all of these little things, these little stick figures flexing throughout this whole thing or whatever. And the players really jumped on board with all of it. And that was a big piece where we saw like our mental health and our mental strength was going to be a big thing for us because we were talented, just like every team. We were talented, had that skills, but they really believed into them. And yeah, we jumped down on Gretna right away in the first game. We're up 5-0. We hit a grand slam. Our catcher had really had a great offseason. She hit up, or postseason. She ended up hitting like 650 for the postseason between districts and state, and never looked back. One benefit to us, I think, and I told them at that time, is like we actually didn't play Gretna in a regular season that year. So it was a little bit unknown. You know, it was like going in, we hadn't seen each other or whatever. So we got to go in again. We played free and loose, and Abby pitched extremely well. Just kind of dominated the entire time. Yeah, it was a great experience for them to do that and to be able to qualify for state after the season that they had kind of gone through was huge.
Yeah.
And like I said, I come back to our hashtag flex, which kind of led into the 2022, was that it was very tangible for those girls to see that. Like I said, guys, when we play this way, we celebrate us and we celebrate our teammates and we celebrate, everything. We forget the negative stuff because negative stuff's going to happen. Errors are going to happen. Strikeouts are going to happen. And when we just put that aside and accept that it's going to happen, but then we celebrate the big things, we just, our dugout and our team, the positiveness that we just had through that district was huge. And I wrote down the quote because Patty Gasso reminded me of when she was talking about after the World Series this year and said, unapologetic about the energy and celebration that you have. And I was like, yeah, that was us to a T,
Yeah.
and I really like that. It allows them to play that way. So
That's incredible. And having that buy-in from your seniors, even from Mariah, who wasn't able to physically contribute, I think says a lot, but it wasn't something that we had talked about in that poignant moment of the season. It was something that they had prepared ahead of time. Talk about the identity of Big Fatty Baddies and kind of get into that of the mental skill that we're talking about here is self one versus self two from the inner game of tennis, and using that as a tangible tool to recognize and give your athletes an opportunity to own that themselves and hold themselves accountable to recognize when they're not being in that identity and then be able to flip that switch, which for you guys is Big Fatty Baddies.
yeah, so big fatty baddies, BFF. So they came up with that as a positive self too that they were ready to go with. And the great thing about it was that they took ownership of it, they took accountability of it, and it was again that language and communication piece to where they were able to talk to each other and be like, "Hey, you're in self one right now. You need to take a minute and fix that, and you need to get back to big fatty baddies." And you could see it. You could see it as we walked through. You could see our dugout and their mentality. And we talked throughout the season how we would see players early on in the season, and when they would struggle, they would isolate, they'd get down on themselves, or really snap back at other players. And this gave us a good communication piece for them specifically with each other of, hey, that's not how we're going to roll. You need to get your mind right and move back into self too. And so that we can be successful as a team. And they did a great job with it, and that team specifically, they were just able to show us that growth piece, especially going into districts. Again, how we kind of talked about how they just kind of stayed positive through everything, even when errors did happen, or even when that big strikeout did happen, they just, okay, hey, let's go get the next one. And that went all season long, especially coming back and kind of rebuilding the staff a little bit after the injury we had there mid-season. It was a huge piece for them to understand how to stay positive and get through that growth piece, and get through the negative piece and get through the hard stuff. And because it happened, I mean, we definitely, mid-season we were losing some games that we probably wouldn't have normally. And, so they had to recognize that, and they're like, okay, we can sulk or, and check our stuff in, or we can figure it out. And they did a really good job with it.
That's incredible. And talk about, were there any moments where you Are these moments that you and your coaching staff overheard? Did you let them take some of the huddles? Give us a behind the scenes look of that. Like, what does that?
I would say as the season went on, um, especially at districts, um, we gave them the huddles. Like it became a situation where again, like that team, like they once we got through everything, like they knew their jobs, they knew what they needed to do. Just like last season, they knew their jobs, they knew what they needed to do, and we let them control kind of their motivation and their motor in there, and so all the time we're just like, hey, I'll be here to help. I'll give you all the tools you need, everything else, but I can't start your motor for you. And so that's one of those things where they really, once they got moving, they were kind of unstoppable. So
So awesome. So building off of the 2021 season, now let's talk about last year, which would have been the 2022 season. Talk about the kind of turnover of those seniors. What does that look like in your program? I guess we're talking now about the season. I'm getting them mixed up. Talk
yeah,
about
it's all good.
2022. I'm
Yeah.
combining them.
Well, so the great thing was that from 21 to 22, we had all those juniors that then came into seniors, which was why the hashtag flex was able to come because you saw it. You saw it at districts and they went into state and they still kind of played that way. When we got to state, it was definitely like, hey, we're not necessarily supposed to be here. And so, there was a little bit of hesitation as they got through that piece of it. But, coming into this year, like I was able real early in our off-season meeting to say, guys, this is how we played at districts. This is what you need to understand. This is how we play period from now on. It is a new identity stamp, for the program, and we'll accept nothing less. And they jumped on board with it. Again, it was all 8 of them had been starters the year before. And then so now here they are starters again, and they were just able to roll. In fact, in my career, it was kind of nice because it's the first time I've had that many kids. I kind of stick around for one season or whatever between not graduating, and so on the coaching side of it, we really were just able to kind of keep rolling for 2 years straight. So it was really nice, which is kind of the challenge we got this year because now they're all graduating.
Right.
But yeah, so moving into 2022. They took ownership of that. They took ownership of flex, became ourself too. And so then that's how they played. And then they held everybody accountable on the field. Even our freshmen, our true freshmen, they're like, hey, we know that you're young and you're inexperienced, but this is how we play. So you need to step up to this. Like you're going to be fine, but this is where we're going to hold you to this accountability. So it was great to see them grow through that piece of it.
Yeah. And in a loving way. I mean, I think it's hard for them because they don't want to be the cranky senior,
Right.
the nitpicky senior. And so if it's an identity piece of this is how we do things around here, it's not a he versus we versus she. It's just this is welcome to the program. You're a freshman. You want to hop on this bus? Hop on the bus. This is how we do it.
Yeah, no, it was great because I had a very senior level third baseman last year. She was locked down third for many years, and she did a great job. Well, she had the freshman right next to her, and so we had those conversations with her. It's like, hey, this is kind of your job. You guys are same side of field. You're going to talk to her. You're going to keep her positive. You're going to keep her loose. Don't let her get into her head. Let her talent just do the job, and don't think too much about it. You do all the thinking. Just make sure that she knows what's going on that way, because your experience is going to be there to help her through that piece of it. And they did a great job. They really did. It was a nice blend. And then on the other side of that, she was still a senior. However, she was a first year starter for us over at first base. But she was part of that class, and she was part of that identity, about the flex mentality. And same thing, just straight owned it and did a phenomenal job. This first year she had ever played first base. And, in the last 5 years I've been in South, was one of our better first basemen. She did a great job. So, and all of that came with her work and their mentality, and being able to train teams. Yeah.
So awesome. So fast forward to 2022 postseason districts. Talk about that.
So we had a little bit better season, going into it. We're in the Millard North District. They're number 4 overall. But we definitely had a lot of hopes coming into this one. So we dropped the first one we beat Bell East, and then we dropped one to Millard North on that first day. So we got to come back and go through the elimination days. This is where our positive and flex mentality really came in. So It was kind of a nasty cold day. It was like 40-mile-an-hour wind blowing straight in. I mean, it was extremely windy. That definitely affected the game. We talk about it all the time. However, our outfielders and defense in general just handled the wind and the ball, and our outfielders made some absolutely amazing catches throughout in the whole game. It wasn't like one or two or three. They probably made 11. That made a huge difference in the game, and they stuck with it. And we celebrated every one of them. I mean, it was just a matter of, like I said, they played with flex, and that was their self-2 identity that year, and they knew, again, we were still kind of in a position wild card point wise that we had to win districts to be able to go to state again. And so they knew the task at hand, and they showed and they got it done. They beat East the second day. They beat Millard North in a dogfight in the first championship game.
Push the
And
if game,
it was
right?
definitely, say again.
You had to push the if game. I mean,
We
that
did. We
was
had to push the if game, and it was definitely, we had to play really well to be successful in that first one. And then the second game, our mentality was there. It was flex, and we kind of took control of that second game really early. Yeah, and so again, it was just them staying together, and it was really nice for that group. I mean, they've been together for a long time, and we're able to graduate a very successful class. So
well, and I think they could have very easily crumbled under the expectation of we've been to state. This is now a new program expectation. We are now in another tough district. How do we battle the elements? We dropped a game. We're in the losers bracket. We're seniors. We don't want our season to end. I mean, there is pressure after pressure after pressure that was mounting that postseason. So to see them at state again
yep.
with that class was really special.
And they didn't fold to any of that because of that self-2. It's because they continued to believe in who they were and how they were going to play. And had we lost at the end of it, okay, I'm pretty sure that the most of us, everybody could have accepted it because we played that way. But because we played that way, they were able to achieve that district championship. So,
yeah, and we won't get into the details of state, but I think that this even the way that it ended at state, I think they knew there was no doubt in their mind that they belonged.
yeah,
Whether it was eighth or runner up, or they could have had that shot at state champions. It was the fact of seeing them behind the scenes in the conversations when season was done of we have every right to be there. Standing in Hastings, standing in the complex, giving them hugs of we belong here was
yep.
just, it gives me chills to think about.
They did. They absolutely earned it. And so I'll be honest with you, this is the second game of the state tournament. It was against Millard North again. And it ended up being an absolute dogfight. I think the final was 15-14. But I will again contribute their self to that fight. They could have easily chopped it up. In fact, actually, we were the ones that went ahead early, up 6-0, and we just kind of saw it coming back, and we played each other 4 times at that point, a point in a week and a half or whatever. And so, pitching and hitting, there was no secrets left. It was just about performance at that point. And, and again, so it's kind of one of those where, yeah, we lost, but we can definitely walk away knowing that they played hard. Mentally, they were in the game. They never at any second gave up. And, when the time ran out, we just were on the downside of it. So,
yeah. And now we have this expectation, and we're going into the 2023 season and coming back, working with your team. Talk about the decisions that you're making moving forward, knowing that by the time this airs on the podcast, season will have started. And so what's kind of your mentality going into this year?
Yeah, gosh, by the time this airs, we're going to be 10 games into the season already. So we did have a big turnover, right? We're going to be really young this year. We're definitely going to be sophomore led, probably looking to start somewhere between 4 to 5 sophomores in those positions. Having you come back in to work with them and we've kind of redone a personality test again this year, and our color changed a little bit. Yep. So it's not near as many oranges. They're a little bit more blues and golds. So we get along a little bit better. But they're still a very seasoned team, and the fact that they've got a lot of experience under them. A couple of the kids that our players we're going to lean on a little bit. Did perform for us quite a bit last year as freshmen, and they're finding their own identity. to be competitive out there, to hold each other accountable. And we even about mid-season last year, we started talking about how when this year comes, like our teams couldn't be more far apart personality wise. They're just it's 180 degrees. So these guys, they show up and they've accepted it, and they're looking to hold each other accountable, which is that big piece. Their confidence is there. They know that they can do it. Even the younger ones, they were there and they saw it. And so, yeah, it's an expectation to get to Hastings, but it's definitely not, um, it's not a daunting task for them. They just, that's when our season ends is when we go to Hastings. So, and nothing before that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm so excited for this season and continue. We've had lots of classroom sessions, 2 classroom sessions already this summer, and so the next time I see you will be at the scrimmage and talk a little bit about coaching and the decisions that you've made as far as intentionally finding times, even when I'm not working with your team, to slow down, have them journal, maybe having a chalk talk where past Coach Horton would have. I know you guys play Sandlot in the end, but those are all intentional coaching decisions. Talk about those decisions that you're making now as a coach.
The journaling is coming from our head cross country coach has been doing it for 2 years, and he did a coaches clinic up with us this last spring. And I listened to him, and he's got some pointed conversations that his runners do pregame and postgame. And I really like that because it gives our kids an opportunity to, one, lay out their goals, but then two, to sit down and reflect. Did I meet my goals? Yeah, maybe we lost, but I met my goal. And so that's kind of a big thing that I want them to understand. Because one-on-one conversations I have at times, and I'll talk to a kid over the weekend. I'm like, "Hey, you're out with your club team. How did you do this?" And she's like, "Well, I didn't do very good." I said, "Oh, well, what did you do?" And she's like, "Well, I hit 2 triples, a double, and a home run, but we lost." And so we've been having those conversations. I've said, "Yeah, okay, you lost, which is a bummer." I said, "However, you can't come tell me that you did a bad job when
Right.
you went 700 for the weekend." And so the journal in itself is that piece of it, is that I want them to be able to recognize, hey, I am doing a good job. It's hopefully going to allow them to stay in that self too, up at the top peak in their zone for a lot longer. And that they'll be able to accept maybe some setbacks or failures without really looking too much into it, because I'm going to have 15 pages of success, and I'm going to have one page of, yeah, it wasn't a great day, but okay, but I had 15 pages of success. And so, yeah, we've been using it a little bit different this summer. And the fact that they write down after like team camps, or we do our PGMs on Monday, right? Our personal growth Mondays. And then we'll use those as well moving into our player meetings for the fall. And then that way we've got same common language, and they can really point to stuff. Cause like you're like, "Oh, I need to go talk to somebody," but it's 2 days later and you're like, "I knew I needed to talk to you. I don't remember what it was," but here it is in the journal, and we can sit down and have those conversations. But I just want those guys to be able to really, one, set their goals, but two, recognize that they're achieving, whether as a team we're being successful or not, but them as an individual player, they are getting better. And you're right. 10 years ago, not something necessarily on my radar to be doing
Right.
something like that. And I think this is just going to give them an opportunity to, one, grow as an individual, but it gives us an opportunity as a team just to be more successful. So
Right. Well, and even before we hit record today, we were talking about the difference of this generation really does have a lot more pressure of Game Changer and Twitter and recruiting and live streams of their games. And, we had kind of talked about it's a quicksand slope, slippery slope, whatever you want to call it, of attaching their identity to their performance on the field. Can you kind of talk about how are you addressing that with your players?
I think the biggest thing is one, we just make sure all of our kids, like, they know that we care about them, whether they, perform on the field or not. I really do try to make sure that we have a conversation at the beginning, and that, whether you're a starter for me or not, we care about you as an individual, right? You need to understand that, like, your personality and who you are as a person doesn't relate to what you do on the field. And so we address that and make sure that we kind of have those conversations, and that they understand it. The social media part of it is it's just more and more and more. I mean, I just saw as recently as yesterday that there's a Colorado softball high school player that's got an NIL. And so this thing is just it's out there and it's going to show up in our sport. Everything goes from pros to college to high school, and we'll see it soon enough. But the big thing for them is that I want them to understand that when they come out here, one, we care about them, but two, they're representing something bigger than themselves. And so they get the opportunity to do that through, competing, role player, focusing on their growth as an individual so that when they leave the program, I always want to be able to produce good citizens. And so when they leave, I hope that's what we want to do.
Yeah, and more than anything, knowing, hey, Coach Horton had my back, and I know that the dice doesn't always roll that way as head coaches. I have a couple more questions for you before we close out, and one of them is a specific question to you, and then the other one is one that I ask all my podcast guests. But the first one specific to high school coaching that, as a former head high school coach myself, do you talk about what is one thing that you wish more players, parents, other coaches out there, what's one thing that you wish more people understood about coaching?
Great question. I mean, the time commitment piece of it, the fact that we really lose sleep over almost every decision we do make,
Mhm.
um, that we want to help all of our players grow and get better and to reach their fullest potential. Right? That's like our number one goal. What people see, however, is what the product that we have to put on the field. And when we have to put the best nine out there, that doesn't always include player 11 or player 12 who did everything we asked him to, who played hard, who was in the weight room, who improved, just like the other nine improved. And just understanding like, that we're actually all on the same team. It's not, coaches versus players versus parents or whatever, that we're here to help them grow as an individual. That's a big piece of it. Being able to, I think maybe a few years back, I think volunteering was a little bit more common as far as like, parents helping out and stuff like that. And there just seems to have been more of a wall kind of built up between coaching staffs and parents and players and all that kind of stuff because a lot of people start focusing only on number one, that one individual. That's kind of the hardest thing I think we see right now. Um, and just know that like we're literally trying to do our best,
Mhm.
and put a good product on the field and take care of all of our players at the same time. And just because your kid's not a starter doesn't mean that we've forgotten about them or don't care about them or whatever. It's just at this point in time, that's where they're at. And I guess lastly, there is that I tell people all the time, like one of the things I love about coaching high school is that we get a mix of kids and we get to represent our community. And I'll have a freshman and a senior on the same field. They're not like all 18 U's or 17 U's or 16 U's or whatever. And we're putting the best nine up there and giving them the best shot that they can. I just really enjoy being able to do that, being able to enjoy to watch them grow over those 4 years and stuff. So if parents could just, remember that piece of it sometimes that, we're doing it for the love of the game and for the kids still, it'd be nice.
That'd be amazing. Yeah,
It would.
we all need reminders because I think it's easy. I mean, I lost myself as a head coach getting swept up in the X's and the O's, and so from a veteran coach to a former coach, I think that's one thing that I took away from you and watching your programs. Now, on the other side of coaching as a mental performance coach is you practice what you preach and you really do care about your kids. And I think the wins and losses really do take care of themselves, which is cool. So, all right, final question.
What you
You
got?
were a time traveler and you can go back in time and give your past self one message. What would you tell yourself?
Relax. It all works out in the end.
It does. It absolutely does.
Yeah, I think especially early on, um, when I was at my former high school, I put a lot of time and pressure in on myself and even on the kids to perform. We were trying to build a program over there, and it just I really cared a lot about what we looked like on the field and how that translated to wins and losses and everything else. And I think the biggest thing is that we can probably get more with less sometimes. I mean, I'm almost down to a 2-hour practice nowadays in the fall, and if you talk to some of my alumni from the other school, it wasn't uncommon to go to 3 or possibly even 3.5 hours at some point. So,
Right.
less is more. Yeah, if I could just tell them to relax a little bit and, listen to the players and let them play, not control quite as much, that you'll be successful with it. So,
Gold advice. Coaches out there that are listening to this, I hope you are listening because I could have heeded that advice 5 years ago. Tom, thank you so much. As your girls call you, Coach Horton. I just really appreciate all of your mentorship and your friendship and sharing just your authentic advice and behind the scenes look of what it's been like to implement some of these mental skills. I know we are going to talk more about this on the podcast, but the best place to follow you in your season, I know you guys are active on Twitter. If you guys want to follow your season, Twitter is the best place, right?
yeah, Twitter, it's the same handles, PLS Titan Softball, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. One more thing that I do, just make
Yep.
sure that everybody gets the information out there. But yeah, it'd be a great time to follow it. We should have a good season.
It's going to be a great season. I'm looking forward to it.
All
Awesome.
right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.